Another episode of the Run With It podcast is behind the scenes, unedited, raw, unfiltered, unanonymized. That'll come in later. You guys will see it. That was for you, Ethan. All right, you guys ready to jump into it?
Yeah,
let's do it.
Perfect. All right.
By the way, Chris, the last thing I'll say is 200,000 today. Okay, so that's what you can cut in.
Okay, got it.
Practice on it.
Took me a second to get there. Yeah, thank you. All right. Welcome to Run With It, where we bring you business ideas from proven founders. Each episode, you'll hear a new business idea and the exact steps our guest would take to get started. We're your hosts, Chris Justin.
And Ethan Janney. And on today's show, we have Ryan Kuhn. He's the co-founder of Avail, an all-in-one solution designed for do-it-yourself landlords and their tenants. Ryan and his co-founder drew up the idea on a napkin, learned to code, launched in 2012, and have grown steadily ever since, serving 13,000 landlords in 2015 and over 200,000 today.
That's all great, Ethan, but you know our show is about new business ideas. Ryan, you have got one to help create digital identities, anonymizing the digital world. Ethan, you got me, man. Welcome to the show, Ryan, and tell us about the idea you would like our listeners to run with.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you guys so much for having me. I'm really excited to be on the show and to share an idea. The idea that I'm excited to talk about actually is, I would say, more of a problem that we currently face here with Avail and a proposed solution, but excited to talk with you guys and to kind of flesh it out. So my problem that I have is that there's a lot of individuals out there, there's a lot of digital identities out there floating around in cyberspace that are not connected to the physical identity in the real world. So the solution for this would be to unanonymize the digital world, and to have a better system for tying and tracking digital identities to the underlying person who's sitting there at a computer or on a smartphone.
I just want to say this is my request for the rest of the episode. We're not going to say unanonymized. It's going to be unanonymized, just because I like the way it sounds. And I think it's going to be like part of the marketing campaign that it's going to be hard to say.
Certainly a tongue twister.
All right, good. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry, I just needed to bring that in.
Yeah. No. So, I mean, I think we're in our business. So we operate in the residential rental space. I mean, there's a handful of different ways that fraud and kind of lack of security impact both landlords and renters out there all across the country and around the world. And so one of the things that we run into a lot is different fraud around rental listings. I don't know if Chris or Ethan, if you guys have ever gone on Craigslist and tried to rent an apartment or rent a house, but
it's not easy.
So, in New York City, it's ridiculous, especially. Terrible.
Yeah, I mean, it's an awful experience, but one of the challenges out there is that about a third of all those Craigslist ads are actually spammers. They're like fraudulent listings. There's someone who went on Zillow, they grabbed the photos, posted it as for rent, and then says, hey, Ryan, or hey, Chris, or hey, Ethan, like, wire me $1,500 and I will mail you the keys. It's like, unfortunately, people fall for that stuff. There's also a major issue with payments and stuff. And then looking more towards kind of current events, and here in the next couple of weeks, we've got a somewhat important election here in the States.
Little bit.
little bit. And, there's been a lot of talk about with COVID, are people going to be comfortable going out and voting in person? I've read a lot about the opportunity and challenges, both with digital voting, and it all comes down to this like identity management. So that's really the problem. I think there's got to be a solution out there that one of the listeners, someone in the audience, can go run with this problem, create a unique solution to fix this.
So here's the thing that's just starting to creep me out already, right? Well, first of all, our working title for this business is Unanon. And it's like, I feel like just pursuing an idea like this, people are going to think that you are part of some sort of government black market cabal trying
Big
to,
brother. Yeah.
you know, put a chip in everybody's, you know, toe or whatever. So would you pursue this? That's what I want to know. Would you actually pursue this idea given that part of it? You know, maybe there's other difficult parts, but would you feel comfortable having to kind of put your reputation out there as a founder of this business and deal with any repercussions that people might have? Like, look at what Mark Zuckerberg has to deal with Facebook, you know. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I certainly recognize that there's going to be some privacy concerns, some kind of unease around tying your digital identity to your physical identity. But if you go back 100 years, and a lot of communities were based on an individual's reputation and really relied on an individual to kind of stand by their word and do what they say they're going to do and stand by the words that they put out there on the internet. And so I actually think there's unfortunately a lot of hate right now that exists on the internet. And I actually think I would almost spin your question, Ethan, and say that, hey, there's while there will be privacy issues that will inevitably come up and will have to be dealt with, I think that actually trying to tie that physical identity to the digital identity will do much more good than harm.
Yeah, it reminds me of like credit scores, and you got a site like Credit Karma, and at least in my current level of awareness around whatever conspiracies are going on behind the scenes, I go to a site like Credit Karma and I'm like, oh, this is cool. You know, I get to check up on my credit score. They might give me some suggestions on how I can improve it. And a little tip here, by the way, for anyone listening. And Chris, I think I actually found some for you. There's free money. Well, it's your money waiting for you from the government. So
why did you?
There's a weird aside. So this is right. No, I'm serious. Okay, so listen. It's called, this is a great opportunity to share something with you that I had no in to share with you before because it was just weird. So just on Credit Karma, just this totally aside, creditkarma.com, you go there and there's this little thing that they have of a list of other things that they offer. And one of them is find like money that the government has. Cause like if you have like an unpaid bill, like a bill that was paid, but you needed a refund or something like that, and you disconnected with the, you know, whatever the utilities company, they have to give that money to the government. And it's like sitting on hold for you. And you go to these sites and you type in your name, and the Secretary of State or whoever manages that will say, oh, you have, you know, about $100 from the local utility company. And Chris, I looked you up. And you do have some money. If you look it up, you've got some money coming to you.
Yeah,
we got like a couple $100 recently.
Sure.
It only tells you like, maybe $100 or more. It'll say you like less than $100 or more than $100. But I think you had something that looked interesting. Yeah.
This sounds like a phishing scam, Ethan.
I got the money in the, I swear, I really got
give
the
me all
money
your
in the
personal
mail.
sensitive information. Man.
Listen,
Well, why
I'll
are
take
you-
care of it for you. Just give me your social security number. I'll make sure the check gets in.
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny. I think it'd be good to, Ryan, you clearly have a good understanding of why this is a problem and the benefits it would have. And we've got a superficial understanding of that, but maybe move a little bit more slowly through exactly how beneficial it would be to have a digital identity in place. And I guess I'm thinking about it from the perspective of someone who's hearing this for the first time. And I hear, okay, yeah, I mean, we should be able to vote. We've got this antiquated system where we have to go in person. And yeah, I can see how there's some fraud out there for renting apartments, but you know, how hard is it really to just have some username that's tied to me? And how is that a business? And really, like, why is that so beneficial?
Yeah, well, I think unfortunately fraud is a big problem out there, not only in our world here at Avail, but I know the FBI has put out some statistics that show that fraud related issues cause, it's something like $25 billion a year in lost funds. and fraudulent payments. And so if you
Yeah,
think
we
about
almost saw if you think we
about
almost saw it happen right here with Ethan. He was about to scam me of $100.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's hilarious.
Get $100, but give me your social security number, and where I really think that there's going to be a business that can somehow track this down and should be able to more closely match and tie person's identity to their digital presence, and put in safeguards so that if Ethan over here tries to go and steal your identity, then when he goes and tries to pretend that he's Chris Justin, there should be red flags that go off everywhere. And if you try
red flags go off everywhere Ethan goes.
Yeah.
Everywhere I go. Exactly. If there's no,
we need
flag,
that in the digital world.
That's
right.
it.
That's just in the physical world. We need the digital version of red flags wherever Ethan goes.
Wouldn't it be okay? Sorry, now I'm going on another tangent. You know how you've got augmented reality now, right? Like Google Glass, whatever, all that stuff, right? What if you had the Google Glass or whatever new thing, and then on top of someone's head there was a literal red flag that would pop up?
Now you
had
get
a low credit score, or an ex-girlfriend that was complaining or something.
You were worried about the privacy issues, and you're layering this stuff on top of it. That's very Black Mirror. It reminds me of the White Christmas Black Mirror episode. You guys ever seen that one?
No,
I haven't. Tell me more.
It's very long, but it's excellent. And the at the end, I'm just going to jump to it. It doesn't ruin the entire episode. Yeah, it doesn't ruin it all. But you guys have had years to catch up on this, and you're missing out. But at the very end, this guy had been helping the police agency, even though he had done something wrong. So it's kind of like an informer type role, let's say. And they let him go free, but they blacklisted him in the world such that whenever anyone saw him, they just saw this fuzzy face, and they heard the Charlie Brown, they couldn't hear him speak. So he's living amongst the world, but he cannot interact with anyone. And yeah, that's what you're trying to do, Ethan.
Sometimes I feel like that is me in the world. I talk to people in it. All the years. Wow.
All right, let's bring this back to reality here, Ryan. Thank you for describing that a little bit more, why this would be beneficial. I'm sure we'll unpack it a little bit more as we go through the show. But all right, so you've got hands-on experience just diving into something that you have no idea how to approach. You and your co-founder have done that with Avail. What lessons have you learned from that process at Avail that you think could apply to jumping into this completely new idea?
Yeah, I think from our experience building Avail, there's three things that really are needed and it takes to launch any business. And so if someone out there is listening to this and they're going to go try and unanonymize the world, the digital world, what I think would lead someone to be successful are three things. So number one, they have to have a good understanding of the problem. So my email is ryan@avail.co. Email me, I can tell you all the ins and outs about this problem. Get yourself very familiar with the problem, understand it, feel the pain, look at this, obsess over this. Number two, in order to be successful in pursuing this, you've got to go out and get the skills that it takes. You've got to, whether it entails becoming a digital privacy expert or becoming kind of a legal junkie, studying up on all the GDPR, all the CCPA stuff, understanding exactly kind of all the rules, regulations, technical skills. For me personally, what that entailed was actually spending about 3 years learning Ruby on Rails. So I fortunately, before starting Avail, had a good understanding of the problem that we were trying to solve. I understood the real estate industry. I understood exactly what we were trying to do and accomplish. Didn't know the first thing about starting a digital company. And so what that meant for me is I had to go out and get skills. My co-founder did the same. We spent about 2.5 years like cooped up in our apartments here in Chicago, just like learning to write code. So number two,
I just need to interrupt here. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I don't know what you're gonna say, Chris, but okay. First of all, I'll just to summarize what we've got so far. Understand the problem, get the skills that it takes. I know so many people, myself included, who decided to learn to code to start a particular business or whatever, and just went nowhere. So I'm just curious. Okay, first of all, the idea for Avail came before you learned how to code. True?
Yep.
Okay. And then how confident were you that you were actually going to do Avail with these programming skills that took you 2 or 3 years to learn? Were you in the back of your mind were like, oh, well, listen, I'm going to learn a marketable skill either way. We'll do anything with this. I mean, that's a lot of time to put in before you make $1 on a project, right?
Yeah,
and most people, when they put that amount of time in, they walk out of it saying, I'm a dumbass.
My question is going to piggyback off that too. It's very similar. It's that's a long time to spend on it. How were you scared at all in that process that someone else would swoop in and do that idea before you guys learned how to code and could launch it?
Yeah, I mean, I will say, and that was a painful couple of years. It was definitely a big investment. In hindsight, glad I did it, but at the time there was, of course, that like doubt. Both internally, there's that doubt. I mean, several girlfriends that I broke up with me, like, you know, they obviously doubted it too, and were wondering what I was up to. But
Nice
I think
show them now.
The what's funny about it though is Ethan, almost as you mentioned, that was part of the thinking. So my co-founder and I, we had this idea and this problem that we wanted to solve. He and I were fortunate. We had a set amount of money that we said, okay, we're going to invest this money into launching this business. And we approached this problem and we said, look, we don't know how to write code. In order to launch a software product, like you kind of need either to know how to code or you need to pay someone to do it. So our thought process in actually going through this was really saying, okay, there's this fixed amount of money that we're going to invest in the business. We can, option number one is we can go out and hire someone. We can hire a freelancer, we can hire a creative agency, we can hire, you know, our friends who know how to code. We can go that route. And then if Avail works out, great. We maybe saved ourselves a year or some amount of time. We also looked at it and said, hey, there's a second option. Second option is we could essentially use that money that we would pay someone else. And in kind of a circular way, we could like pay ourselves. And we could use that startup capital as we were paying ourselves to learn how to code in order to launch the business. And we ended up going that second path because at the end of the day, if Avail didn't work out, Ethan, almost like you said, we would still have a marketable skill and we could either go start another business or we could go get a job as a software engineer. But we would actually like walk away with something as opposed to that first option I mentioned. If we had just paid someone to do this and the business didn't work out, like we'd be sitting here broken with nothing.
So a follow-up question, and I don't think this is going for too far off the rails with not talking about this particular business idea, because I think it could be helpful to the person listening. So in terms of the way that you learned how to code and the investment, first of all, if you don't mind sharing, and if you do, that's fine, or maybe I'll make you, how much money did you invest up front of you guys' own money? And then also, did you have some cool hack for you had like a private coding tutor, or did you guys just get on, you know, one of these coding tutorial sites and go?
Yeah, so to your first question, Lawrence and I were fortunate. We had both been pretty kind of thrifty early on in our careers.
Working in investment banking, that's would give you a little bit of cash, I guess.
We had saved a little bit. So I think he and I initially each put in like $20,000. So, I mean, at the time in your late 20s, that was real money. I mean, it still is. That's a lot. to invest in a business. So combined, we had $40,000. We said, this is our startup capital. And so with that, we then said, okay, what's the shortest path to learning to code? For me personally, I went through one of these really intense coding boot camps. So went through this Ruby on Rails course back in the day in Chicago. It was called Code Academy, later became the Starter League. Was this like really good experience. Spent 5 days a week, shoulder to shoulder with other men and women who wanted to learn how to write code. That for me was the best path. And that was a 3-month program. And then the kind of following, 21 months, the next almost 2 years after that, it was really just a lot of trial and error. It was building a lot of Twitter clones, learning Twitter Bootstrap, learning Ruby on Rails, like spending countless hours going through different things on Stack Overflow, which is this online community.
I was your girlfriend, I would have dumped you at that point for sure. Look at Twitter clone.
She did.
You're building a Twitter clone. You said you were starting a real estate site. What is this Twitter clone thing?
Yeah.
Oh man, that's awesome though. It's amazing. It's a great story. It's very inspiring. And the sort of level of commitment that you guys have had. I want to make sure that we're staying on track with your 3 bullet point thing, just to refresh the listener here. So we started with, you had some 3 key factors that would take the business. You said, understand the problem, get the skills that it takes. Let's go to the third one, unless you have a little bit more about, so we can talk more about what skills they are, but what's the third factor that you think is really important?
Yeah. Third factor, really important, persistence. Just don't give up. I think anytime you're starting a company, anytime you're really embarking on anything that's challenging, there will inevitably be people who dump you, that call you names, that say you're stupid, that don't believe in what it is you're doing. But just don't give up. I think that
I might have stayed with you if I was your girlfriend.
You sound like you're a charismatic guy. You probably.
The way you talk about commitment and all that, don't giving up. Yeah,
focus on the long term. Yeah,
that makes sense.
But no, I think it's crazy important. I mean, even when we were first talking about anonymizing the world, like,
did you write out all the syllables? It looks like you looked over to the side there.
I looked over. I'm like, how did I write this out? But I'm like, I've got 3 different spellings here on this like paper next to me. So I think it is that like deep understanding of the idea, that like learn the skills that it takes, and then number 3, like pursue your passion, don't give up.
I want to ask you about identifying this problem a little bit, because you are in such a great position to be able to speak to its worth. And stealing Ethan's line there, if you are comfortable sharing the numbers, that would be super helpful. If not, maybe we'll try and make you, I don't know how effective we'll be from afar, but you mentioned at the top of the episode that this digital identity would be really beneficial for your business itself. Can you give us a sense for how much, you can answer how much you would pay, how much it would save you, what percentage of your costs are associated with managing digital identities? Can you give us a guidance on that?
Yeah, it's a good question. And for us, again, here at Avail, we spend a lot of time focused on digital identities. Obviously, every month we're moving tens of millions of dollars in rent payments from renter to landlord. Along the way, we have had some small issues with payment fraud, and someone saying they're someone else who they aren't really that person, and maybe found a bank account information out there on the dark web and like tried to kind of steal funds. Essentially, it's theft. Now, over the past 5 years since we launched the company, we've invested really heavily in kind of combating this, and we continue investing in this. And so, for me, it is a problem that we still face, and and these like spammers and fraudsters are still trying to beat our system every day. We've got countermeasures in place now that I wish we didn't have to invest. I can't even put numbers on it. It's like maybe an engineer and a half for almost full time. It's like we invest a lot in this like digital security, digital privacy, digital like kind of combating fraud.
So let's call that
Meaning you have
200
you have
grand
a
a year for 10 years or so.
Yeah, that's
Something in that
a fair
ballpark.
statement, but it's not
Plus
only
the amount that
us,
you
it's like every other company like us. They
right,
all want this.
right. And that's interesting. So there's the cost that you're spending in preventing this from happening. There's the direct cost of theft. In terms of relative scale, would you say that the theft is an order of magnitude lower, about the same, higher?
I would say over the past 18 months to 2 years, we've gotten really good at this. And our like loss rate to fraud is, I mean, it's a small fraction. I mean, it's less like 0.00002% of like all payments we process. Like
Sure.
it's very immaterial today.
So the other angle that I want to take on this is if you wanted to disrupt a company like Avail, they have spent all this time and money to protect against fraud. And this is true for any company in the financial services space. That's to me one of the biggest barriers to starting a company like this is you have to figure out how to protect people's identities and their money. And if you had an affordable solution out there that you can plug into your system, then that could save you years of heartache in addition to the direct financial costs. And it could make the difference between you starting the business or not.
Yeah.
In terms of a reference
so
point too, just want to call out, I feel like Stripe is probably doing a really great job at this, you know, and I think that's really probably one of the most difficult parts that Stripe had to tackle in terms of also the logistics, but the security side of it. I use Stripe for a few different businesses, and I'm always pretty amazed at like the whole security process seems pretty laid back with Stripe, meaning it just seems like they've kind of got a lot of it figured out, such that if a payment isn't supposed to go through, it just doesn't go through. You know, it's not like somebody's money gets taken. They just have fail safes against this type of thing happening. And I think that's probably also what's going on with your business too, right? It's not, you're saying, you know, maybe 0.0002% of the time there's some money lost, but that's actual money lost. But then there's sort of pretend situations in which money would have been lost, but it was somehow rescued by the fact that you have a staff of 1.5 developers, you know, covering this or whatever you're investing in to cover this. So it's kind of like this stuff happens, but it doesn't because it stopped. But if there weren't trials, if there weren't attempts, then you wouldn't need any of these measures, right?
Yeah, that's true, Ethan. And I do think Stripe does a great job with this. I'm assuming that in the back end, Stripe is plugging into a lot of other different data sources out there to try and kind of pull all this together. They also do a lot of machine learning on top of all of the different transactions that are running through their system. So unfortunately, though, I think a lot of that information kind of lives within Stripe, and Stripe has used that to essentially develop their moat around their business. I wish that this were more of kind of a utility for public good, however, that would make the overall internet a little bit more safe, more secure, less hatred, more efficiency, more transparency.
It's really interesting because that to take the evil side of that means that someone out there who would start this business, there's a good chance that they'd be acquired and it'd be they'd walk off with, you know, millions of dollars, and the idea is kept from the rest of the world because someone like Mint buys it or something like that. I want to come back to the actual actions here that a listener can take to get going. You gave us this framework, which is great for guiding principles. let's get into the weeds a little bit. What is something that, so someone's going to identify the problem, and you've already got that figured out. So they need to do a little bit more research. There's plenty of reading that people can do to close that gap. And then in terms of what those skills are, do you have some of them offhand for the second stage that you think that someone would need to pursue?
Well, I think it's all, and what I would say is, I think even taking a step back, Chris, to number one, I think there's a lot of trying to understand who's the customer. And if a listener goes out there and looks at the FBI report that says, hey, there's something like $25 billion per year lost to fraud, like I would really try and dig in and say, where is that money going? Like, who's losing it? Is it PayPal and Venmo that are somehow losing people's money? Or like, who is the end customer? Is it a bunch of companies like Avail? I would go out and I would talk with all of those people, try and understand the pain points, understand what solution it is that they want. And then I think that will inform a lot of the second part here, where of course there's like all the legal kind of issues around privacy, security, PII, like tackling all of those things. But then a lot of the different skills that you would need are largely determined by what is it you're trying to build. Can it run off of this like really elaborate Google Sheet? Or does it need to be custom built software that's hosted on AWS that you're going to need a data scientist to like parse everything? I mean, that I think so much of the skills and the tools that you need are driven by what it is you're trying to build.
I want to go in, I'm going to take this a little bit more abstract here. I'm struck by how clear this all is in your head of what needs to be done. And I think one of the challenges for an aspiring entrepreneur is they've gone through the schooling system and they've had these rubrics handed to them that say, do this. And if you do this, you do it well, you get an A, but you're making your own rubric along the way. And you're clearly good at it. Either you have always been good at it or you figured out how to be good at it.
Trial and error.
Yeah, trial and error. I want to say the word boondoggle. How does this not feel like a boondoggle? Are you guys familiar with that word? That's it. Louisiana. I lived in New Orleans for several years. And that's, you go out on your, like a Don Quixote quest to go do something that is not necessarily tied to some actionable end results. And you did that. I mean, you learned how to code for 2.5 years without any formal system to keep you on that path. It seems like you have to be extraordinarily disciplined to both figure out what needs to be done and stick to it for so long. You talked about this a little bit, but I'm still just struck by it. Can you say more about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think maybe your assertion that it feels like a boondoggle and it feels like just this like haphazard kind of try certain things, see what happens. I mean, in a lot of ways, that's hashtag startup life. It's like that is a lot of what it is, and a lot of you're running essentially the scientific method over and over. You're making you have a hypothesis, you run a couple of tests, and you look at the results and you see what the feedback is, and that determines the next move on the chessboard. And I think looking at life that way both puts some structure around it. It puts some kind of framework around how you can think about things, but also gives plenty of opportunity for creative thinking, because you have to have a certain amount of just instinct and creativity to come up with, well, what's the hypothesis? What are the possible solutions that I want to test? And then you have to really be honest with yourself and look at the data and say, hey, it's time to cut my losses. Like, this thing isn't working. And so for us here at Avail, like one good like lesson that we learned Early on, everyone said, hey, direct mail is the best way to reach landlords. And we tested it. We had like 5 different creatives that we came up with. Everything from this product will make you a better landlord, to we actually had a version that we mailed to people, and in big letters on this postcard it said, you are a terrible landlord. And like we've tested everything, and we found certain messages work, certain things don't. And you have to just like remain optimistic and keep a positive attitude, and just, persistence, don't give up.
Do those tests, are you one of those guys who creates this like 40-page business plan first, and then you put all these tests into that business plan to work it out? Or are you,
Just
flying by
hit
the
the
seat?
ground running?
Yeah, a little bit of both, right? I think early on, as a trained finance person, as someone with an undergrad degree in finance and accounting, we went at building this business with that 40-page business plan. We very quickly realized, hey, everything that we thought we knew was wrong. So throw it out, forget about it. And now it's kind of this, there was a long period where it was a little bit more ad hoc decision making, just see what works, live each day for that day, and live to fight another day. Now with a company with 200,000 landlords, 500,000 renters, we've got a 40-person team. We've got millions of dollars in annual revenue. Like, we've got outside investors. We've got to be a little bit more thoughtful and deliberate about what we do. So the pendulum is almost swinging back to that, like, how do we create our 3-year roadmap? How do we, break that into bite-sized chunks that our team can really understand and go execute against?
When you're talking about trial and error and testing, made me think of this obscure interview I came across. If a listener can find it, it's really interesting to listen to. So it's with a guy that wrote a sales letter. When sales letters, when they actually used to send out letters to people's houses, made, a ton of money. And the interview was about how that sales letter made a lot of money. And I don't know about anybody else, but when I went in listening to it, I thought they were going to talk a lot about the copy. Like, here's the words that we used, and this is why this phrase converted a lot of people. But pretty much the entire interview was around their very scientific method of figuring out which people. So the product was ancestry plaques, right? So it would go, hi, Chris Justin, your family name, has we have a seal for your family name, and we'll send you a plaque with it. And of course, Chris, I'm sure
if you try and scam me like this,
application.
I'm in. No, I want a seal so bad. That would be the front center in my house if you could scam me that way.
Are you serious?
Yeah, hell yeah. I want a coat of arms. Who doesn't want that?
I want a coat of arms. This is why it's so that they just knew that this was a thing that appealed to people, right? And there's ancestry.com. Like, this company, this actual sales letter and product were bought by ancestry.com eventually. But the thing was not about the letter. It was about, who do you send it to in order to make it profitable, right? You can't send it to people with very common names. And you can't send it to people with very rare names, because you lose postage, and it's just like, and then how do you make, so it was all a lot less about what was actually in the letter and more about being scientific about testing. How can you optimize, how is this letter sent out, and who's going to reply and who's not going to, and things like that.
I found that's actually true in online advertising as well. If you're running Facebook ads, much more of it comes down to finding the right people to put the ads in front of than the copy itself.
By the way, I found out, of course, with Facebook ads, you can't say something like, you are a bad landlord. They don't even let you say that. They'll like, this ad is rejected. You cannot do that. But direct mail, some of those,
try it. Yeah, some of those old sales letters, I've read a blog post about one that I think was selling the Wall Street Journal. and it sold Wall Street Journal subscriptions, and just how
Right.
formulaic that letter was. And it's all about like, and here's a guy, and this guy became successful, and this guy did one thing every day, and you can be successful too if you just do what Jim did. And it's like, you know,
I
pulling
think
at
they ran
people's
that
like,
letter for like 40 years or something like that, the same letter.
yeah, it's crazy.
Maybe just a little something interesting. It may be way off track for listeners. I know you guys, it maybe applies a little bit to what happened with you guys. I know you spent so much time coding and then you had to pivot to marketing. You realized you need to learn marketing, but Chris knows about this, I think, and I know about this. People who study marketing, they write out sales letters, sales letters that have grossed a lot of income. It could just be, an ad from a magazine or a letter that got sent out, or just a modern ad that you might see on the internet from a sales page, but just writing it out as a method of learning. So what are the formulas? What's going on here? What are the intricate steps? Did you guys learn about that? Or first of all, did you have any profit before you decided you need to learn marketing?
Yeah.
Or was that the reason you decided you need to learn it?
That was why we needed to learn it.
Right.
Is like, we had, I think, to get our initial, say, 100 or a couple hundred landlords to use our product, we could go out and we could talk with friends and friends of friends and family and everyone. But then we said, holy cow, if we want this to be a big business, and again, landlords can use our product for free. So if we want this to be a big business, we can't go out and like get onesie twosie landlords. Like, we can't go out, and these are not big sales, big enterprise accounts for us. So we need to find ways that we can get landlords at scale. So like last month, for example, we added about 5,000 new landlords to our product.
And I want to jump in your pricing here. You've got a freemium model. The Unlimited Plus plan is what you're charging $5 per unit. So for the listener out there who's hearing that, you can do some mental math for what that's worth.
Yeah. And so I think for us, I mean, we had to learn marketing really early on, and we spent a lot of time going through some of the Google courses that they put out as part of their academy around, here's how to learn AdWords, and here's how to run campaigns, and here's how to set up your AdWords account. Everything to looking at some of the top marketing blogs. So everything from Neil Patel, and just really trying to like learn it. And one of the things I'll say around marketing is, I think there's that scientific method approach that you can be really successful. There's also a lot of psychology that goes into it. Is what I've come to learn, and how important understanding your persona and really trying to get inside their head, and how critical that is.
Thanks for that. That's very useful.
We're coming up on time here. I think experimental question for you, Ryan. If you could go back in time to before you had started Avail, and you could give yourself 15 to 30 seconds worth of advice, what would you say?
I think if I could go back and give myself that like 15 to 30 seconds of advice, I would really probably talk about how important persistence is. I know we talked about that earlier. It's one of our core values here at Avail. And I think that persistence is so important because there's so much out there in the media and kind of startup world that glorifies and glamorizes these like overnight successes. The reality though is that rarely, if ever, happens. And so in order to build a real sustainable business that can keep people employed, can ultimately turn a profit if it wants to, it takes a long time. It's a big investment. And so many people want to start a business, but maybe aren't in a position to do so, or don't really want to put in that time. Like, there's also nothing wrong with, sticking to the 9 to 5. that can be a great option for a lot of people, and there's nothing wrong with that. So, but if you are wanting to go down the entrepreneur path, you got to be willing to put in the hard work. You got to hard work late nights. One of the quotes that I heard is like, if you want to sleep like a baby, start a business, because you'll be up all night crying. And so there's a lot of truth to that. So just know what you're getting into. If you do go down the path of entrepreneurship, which I do think everyone who wants to should, just be willing and prepared to put in a lot of work.
There's something really rewarding about crying in your sleep, to say.
All right, to the listener out
On
there,
that.
yeah, when you want to cry,
And
you
with that, we'll send you off into entrepreneurship.
Just start crying. You're halfway there. Yeah, go out there, take some action, follow through on some of the steps that we've talked about. You can dabble a little bit here, or you can dive in hard. I mean, Ryan made himself available to you. It's a great opportunity from someone who's walked the talk, who's spent those late nights crying, got dumped by his girlfriend. That can be your life, man. It's all there for you.
So glamorous.
So glamorous. Yeah, take some action. Let us know what you've done. Email us at update@runwithit.fm. We may feature you on a future episode with that. We may be able to connect you with Ryan. Ryan might even become a potential business partner for this idea down the line. Who knows? You might be able to charm him. Ryan, thank you very much for the conversation. Really enjoyed it. Where can listeners go to learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah, well, thank you guys so much for having me. If any listener out there wants to connect, shoot me an email. It's ryan@avail.co, or they can head over. They can learn more about Avail at avail.co. We're also on all of the social media channels at Hello Avail.
Great. To the listener, thank you for spending this time with us here. If you like the episode, subscribe to us on iTunes, give us a rating, review over there. It really helps other people discover it. And we will see you next week.
Cool. I'll log us off Facebook, YouTube.